Morning, everyone. Happy Mondays. Welcome to the News Agenda, Move Fleet Street Fox. Today, I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie. And if you can hear him in the background, my dog, because someone's just this minute rung the doorbell. Now, we're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day. We want you to get in the comments, ask us your questions, take part. This is the People's Paper Review. We can't answer them all, but we will answer the best ones. Now, so what do we got today? Well, the Mirror is splashing on the news, being widely briefed all weekend, that they can take our PPE, but they'll never take our freedom. The laws on masks are going to be scrapped on July the 19th, and we will be allowed to make up our own minds on whether to follow the guidance in shops, on the school run, or on public transport. Ditto, working from home. Now, Jason, last night I saw a survey of how many people would be masks on and how many were masks off, and it had split, strangely enough, 48-52. In favour of ditching them. Is this going to be the next battle in the culture wars? Can they leave this up to our common sense? And how has that worked out in the past?
Well, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, Susie? Because you can see this situation where people who don't want to wear masks, the freedom fighters, I seem to remember, a freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, or it's the other way around, will be kind of happily parading themselves around going, look, no mask. And then you've got these people who are going, oh, actually, masks are a good thing. They help prevent the spread of disease. They protect other people. And we're kind of, social kind of etiquette to it as well now. But, it's become widespread in other countries that people wear masks as a matter of course. So you can see about creating a division, which is probably unnecessary, because I've also seen polls saying most people support wearing a mask in public spaces, such as shops, bars, etc.
Exactly. So, what they're doing is they're changing the law, making it no longer a matter of law that you have to wear the mask in these places. But yet people are going to sort of do their own thing anyway. Now, scientists don't like the idea at all. One sage advisor has compared it to leaving the speed limit up to people's common sense. I don't think that really works, because you can choose not to speed. You can't really choose not to have an infection with coronavirus. It infects who it pleases. Excuse me. But the fear is this is going to mean lots more people infected. And although only a percentage of them go to hospital, therefore an increase in hospitalizations. And we already can't cope with the flu every winter. So is the possibility then? I mean, the health secretary reckons this is doable, and we can get through this and treat it exactly like it's the flu. There he is, Sajid, the Sag. He knows what's what. Is this going to be like the flu? Can the NHS cope if we all start having wild infections now we've got the jab?
Well, there's a couple of points here. First of all, the issue of the masks. So to answer Henry's question, what are rules coming in after July 19th? We'll find out this afternoon exactly when Prime Minister's doing another of his coronavirus press conferences. But all the signalling from ministers is that the option of wearing masks will become kind of optional for people. But then there's differences, because Scotland and Wales, they are not lifting the masks. And then there's differences with the regions. We've already got Andy Burnham going, well, actually, we think we should carry on wearing masks on public transport, for instance. It protects the vulnerable, and it protects those most likely to be exposed to the virus. So in London, you've got Sadiq Khan, who's got to make a decision whether Transport for London, where you can carry on wearing a mask on the tube or not, which is up to London, not to the government. But then you've got National Rail saying, well, we're going to allow you to take your mask off. So you've got these differences all over the place. So again, they've created a tension which is probably unnecessary, given there was widespread support for the masks.
Exactly. No, it is a bit kind of, I went up to London for the first time in about a year and a half last week and put my mask on to get on the train. There's only about 2 people in the carriage because it was the middle of the day. So I would have been quite happy to take it off. Whereas if there'd been 100 people in that carriage and I was going up at a different time of day, I'd have kept it on. So in a sense, I can understand how leaving it up to people's common sense does seem a bit more, I suppose, sensible. But they also reckon, the Tories, it seems to be that they say that they couldn't maintain the laws any longer, even if they wanted to, because their own party, full of libertarian wing there, say that they wouldn't support any extension to the legislation. There'd be too big a rebellion in Parliament. And in any case, a lot of members of the public are starting to ignore it. Although many of us are still okay with some of these restrictions, there are enough of us ignoring it now that it kind of starts to become a bit irrelevant. So is this a case, I suppose, of the government sort of adapting its legislation to take into account what people are already doing and what it just can't sustain?
It's definitely a case that the Prime Minister is under a lot of pressure from his backbenchers, as you just said. But that kind of upends the whole idea. We were being driven by the data. We were following the science rather than by the dates. So, Boris Johnson has placed this deadline of July the 19th for the lifting of all freedoms. It's meant to be based on 4 tests, but it also seems to be based a lot now on the internal politics of the Tory party, which is not necessarily the right thing to do. So that is worrying. But the other bit which concerns me most is this idea, and they're admitting this, that when you ease restrictions, the number of cases will rise, which means there will be more deaths. What ministers have not said, and we're refusing to answer this question, although they've been asked it repeatedly, is how many additional deaths, how many additional hospitalizations, how many more cases of long COVID they believe is acceptable. I mean, if you remember the beginning of the pandemic, they were saying every death is regrettable. Now they're saying, well, some is okay. And this is a bit where they could come unstuck, because if they get this judgment call right, and to be fair to the government, this is a really tough call, because we know how bad COVID is for people's mental health. We know its effects on the economy. We know it's been very difficult in terms of backlog of NHS cases for non-COVID procedures, for example. Kind of 5.1 million people on the waiting list. So it's a difficult trade-off, but it could come back to haunt them if the number of cases suddenly goes up and the number of deaths goes up, and people are going, hang on, aren't we meant to be protecting lives?
Exactly. Now, Henry says there, what are the rules of masking after July the 19th? We'll find out later on, Henry, but we think it's going to be make your own mind up, basically. We wash our hands of it, says Pontius Johnson. But, I don't quite agree with all this comparison that it can be just like the flu, Jason. I don't know if you've ever had the flu. I've had lots of serious colds that I've got the flu, and it isn't. I did have the flu once in my 20s, and I was unconscious for 3 days with a terrible fever. I didn't know what was going on around me. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't string a sentence together. So anyone who's ever called in sick and said, I've got the flu, I can't come to work, and you're able to string that sentence together, you don't have the flu. Now, Joanne says, it's up to us if we want to wear them. They're going to be scrapped. It's our choice if we want to wear them. That's the rule. But you don't get long flu, Jason. And you don't usually have children suffering too much from the flu. You don't have young adults dying from the flu. We do get that with COVID. So, Danny, twit, go away. We do have Peter's going to be wearing his mask at all times. There you go. Like I said, I'll be happy to not wear it on the school run because we're outside. I don't think, there's ever really been much danger of contracting coronavirus at the school gates doing the school run. But then again, if I was on a packed London tube, I think I probably would. But, Jason, are we going to have this sort of situation where people are already, they're saying that they're going to do this in a fortnight's time. People are going to start taking their masks off today, aren't they?
Well, that's always a danger. Once you signal something's going to happen, people start reacting to that. And you lose that or undermine that collective goodwill. People have done their utmost throughout this pandemic to do the right thing, to follow the rules because they realize it's in the public good. But when it becomes a free-for-all, then you increase the risk of infections. And one of the things I don't understand is why they're so set towards this deadline. I mean, the vaccination rollout is continuing. They could wait another. Would have been had the first jab, and a far greater number by then would have had their second jab. So that we would have had the safety. So I don't see why they have to work to this kind of fixed.
Because they busted the last deadline, Jason, by letting in the Delta variant. That's why they've got to.
That is the big story, isn't it, Susie? That they allowed the Delta variant in. They're trying to forget that happened. 20,000 people came in from India, which shouldn't have come in, and that was on the government's watch. And now we're playing catch up as a result of it.
Yeah. Now, Adam says, we can't live in fear our whole lives. If we are all double jabbed, why not live a normal life? Wait until September until they've double jabbed all the over 18-year-olds. we're not all double jabbed. That's the trouble, Adam. At the moment, it's about 25 million people who haven't had a vaccination in this country, younger people and those who are not able to have the vaccination. And they are still going to be quite a bit of risk. And that's why, as Jason was just saying there, it may be a bit too early to be doing this. Now, Pauline says, many people, myself included, will be too scared to use public transport. I'm still too anxious to go into shops. It's not fair on those of us who are vulnerable.
I think Pauline is exactly right. I think this is the thing that the government isn't factoring in. I think that, you know, they think people want these freedoms. Actually, I think there's an awful lot of anxiety out there that people would, many cases, would rather we completed a vaccine rollout. So, you know, we are safer. And most people like Pauline who are worried, you know, about using public transport or going to the shops, you know, they have that reassurance. But, you know, I mean, that's the other problem about removing masks is it's the, you know, the people who are most likely to suffer because of this are those people who have to use public transport to get to work and they have no choice. And, you know, the pressure on the government should really be saying, look, what support can we give these people who you know, who have to put themselves at risk on a daily basis because, you know, they can't afford not to self-isolate, for instance.
Yeah, well, they haven't given them much support all the way through. I don't see why that should change now. Now, Paul, keep asking us your questions, everybody. Get into the comments. What do you think about Freedom Day? And are you going to be enjoying all your new freedoms, or is it still not going to be free enough for you? Now, Paul says, for me, a mask is not taking my freedom away. It's a safe measure to prevent a spread of a deadly virus. And this is part of the thing. All the way through this, whether you're wearing masks or working from home, whatever it might be, we've been encouraged to think about other people. And part of, I'm certain, Jason, part of the reason why masks had an impact is not necessarily whether masks did anything, but it's whether it made all of us more aware, when you've got this on your face, that there's something else going on and that you need to be more cautious. Take it off and you all start acting a bit more like normal again. And although we can change the rules in this country, they're keen for us to go back to foreign travel and so on. Other countries are going to be doing completely different things and having different rules and regulations. And if people are traveling to see family or to go on holiday or to go to work, we're going to have different restrictions in different places, even between home and going to work in central London or Manchester, wherever it might be. Never mind if you go on holiday and where you want to be all relaxed, you're going to be all tense because there's more rules to wear. Adina says, why is it okay now? The figures are greater than they were a couple of weeks ago. Is this because of the vaccinations, Jason? It's because they've vaccinated a couple more million people and they think we're over the point that we can do this now?
We're going to have to wait and see what Chris Whitty and the chief scientific advisor Patrick Vallance say at this 5 o'clock press conference, because I mean I am intrigued by why the scientists think this is acceptable at the moment, when, as Dina rightly says, 1 in 260 people in the country have COVID at the moment. Where the last few days, it's been running, number of new cases has been running over 25,000 each day. Now, that's still a very large number. The one thing which has gone down is hospitalizations. But we don't, as I say, that's still it still involves a number of deaths. There are still people, dying in significant numbers each day from COVID. And this is a question we keep coming back to. How many deaths does the government think is acceptable? And in normal times, you'd think 1 death would be unacceptable. They seem to think that, a dozen a day is okay.
20,000 is a good number, Jason. I think someone said about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Now, Nuala says, the thing you haven't addressed is I find those who refuse to be jabbed also refuse to wear masks. So are we to be restricted forever because of these people? We could try locking them all up, Nuala, but I think we'd have no more space left in the prisons. We're going to have to try and convince people to be slightly better and nicer to each other. Now, part of this is we got all this talk about people being double jabbed. They're not taking masks off at least for another fortnight. There's some more restrictions being eased, which may be coming in August. But by the time a lot of this new sort of freedom kicks in, it's going to be September and the weather's going to be on the turn. We're all going to be going inside again. SAGE have predicted winter restrictions for possibly the next 5 years. So are we going to is this why they're doing it? So they can say we've had 6 weeks of freedom in order to somehow justify 6 months of lockdown that's going to happen next winter.
That is the big concern of yet another winter surge, and Chris Whitty has pointed to that. Again, we don't know how bad it would be because of the vaccinations, but it's clearly a worry. And I mean, I'm kind of, but there is this narrative the government's trying to get across, which, we have to learn to live with COVID. But the problem is COVID is not like flu. It's a very different virus. It's much more severe. It affects more people. It's much more dangerous. And it requires a collective effort to defeat it. But what's happening, as one scientist put it this morning, is we're going from we, the public, do this together, to I, the individual, makes my own decision on this. And it's not certain that that's going to be work with a virus as voracious and contagious as COVID.
Yeah, well, time will tell, won't it? Let's see what happens in the next couple of months. What happens in September? I wouldn't bet any money on it all going brilliantly well. Now, we'll move on to the next story now. Back in the mists of time, Theresa May knew where the pulse was and could actually put her finger on it. She said the Tory party was regarded by many as the nasty party, if you remember, back when she had shorter hair and decent shoes. Now, yesterday, the leader of the Scottish Tories, Ruth Davidson, warned again that it looked like the Tories were going back there with the foreign aid cuts that Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson are pushing through, and it's going to reduce aid spending in the rest of the world by billions of pounds, just at the point that the whole planet needs to be vaccinated and to have some money spent on it for our sakes. Now, Jason, are they right? Are people going to turn away from the Tories and start seeing them as the nasty party because they're not giving money out for foreign aid? Or is any government going to find it really hard to sell giving money to foreigners?
This is fascinating. And it comes back in part to what we saw in the Chesham and Amersham by-election, which the Lib Dems took off the Tories. They overturned a 16,000 majority last month to win this seat. And it's caused this division within the Conservatives between the traditional Shire Tories, who've got, these seats in the home counties, etc., and the new Red Wall Tories. Now, what happened was Rishi Sunak cut or broke the promise to spend 0.7% of our gross national income on foreign aid in his last budget. And it was pitched as this will go down in the Red Wall. They're all up there. They all like, kind of charity begins at home, which I thought was incredibly insulting and patronizing towards how Red Wall voters actually think. Mm. But what we're finding is the policy is backfired, because in the kind of these seats in with Tories traditionally had, where they're vulnerable to the Lib Dems particularly, voters actually do care about aid, and they do care about looking after other people, and they do look at the humanitarian disasters in Yemen, for instance, or in the Tigray regions of Ethiopia, and they look at the failure to support children's education, and they look at the failure to actually kind of roll out the vaccine in the poorest parts of the world, and they go, well, hang on, this matters, and we are one of the richest countries in the world, and we made this manifesto pledge, and we're breaking it, and that's why this is coming back to haunt Boris Johnson. And it's not just Ruth Davidson. I should point out she's the former Scottish Conservative leader, but it's all former prime ministers: David Cameron, John Major, Theresa May, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair. All the living prime ministers have criticised Johnson for reversing this, and the prime minister was refusing to give MPs a vote on it because he knows he's going to lose. Now, there was lots of rumours over the weekends and circulation, but actually he will now give them a vote. It's still not clear about what happened.
Well, it's also very good, in fact, quite a cheap way of buying favours and intelligence, and of course helping to restrict the growth of the pandemic and getting everybody vaccinated, which helps us in the long run. So there's really good reason to be doing it, and no doubt perhaps maybe you find some way of saying that vaccine or COVAX, the scheme where Britain is donating some hundreds of millions of doses to go around the world, they'll say find a way of sort of including that in the foreign aid total somehow or another. Now, I'm informed that the comments are on fire, quote unquote. So keep asking us your questions, everybody. We're going to have a roundup at the end. But first of all, there is some good news to discuss. And I want to do it very quickly now before we get back to your questions. Here it is. Now, after a week in which statues of humans have drawn some very unkind comments about Her Royal Highness the Princess of Shotputters, A Springer Spaniel called Max has proved once again that canines are infinitely superior to humans, because look at that. That is a great likeness. That is a good statue. Not only do they make a better statue, Jason, but this one of Max, who's made lots of charity appearances and has won the PDSA Order of Merit here, is on a bench. So you can actually sit next to him and cuddle him. Now, I reckon his ears are going to go all golden shiny because everyone's going to be scratching them and stroking his eyes. A good boy, stroking his head. Would you give him a little scratch behind the ears, Jason, or do you think this is just a routine?
My sister has 3 of these dogs, these little Springer things. They're lovely. But I am just amazed the sculptor managed to get Max here to sit still for long enough to sculpt it. Like their name, they bounce up and down a lot. Very sweet dogs. Yeah,
I think they
and
may
I'm surprised it's not scratching, because that's what they normally do as well. But
yeah, well, there is that too. And he's also got it when he's dry and clean, so that makes a huge difference with a Springer. But Max there has he's earned his Order of Merit for helping people with mental health and so on. So if you find yourselves in Keswick in Cumbria, go to Hope Park, sit down next to the statue of Max the Miracle Dog and give him a little pat on the head and tell him he's a good boy. It's amazing. Even a statue of a dog makes you feel better about life, never mind just the dog. Now, we do have some more comments and questions that you've been asking us about Freedom Day and lockdown, and hopefully some of those are going to pop up on the screen at some point soon so we can actually answer them. But Jason, do you think this is going to backfire on them? Now, Angela says here, my 8-year-old's in isolation as a child in his year group has tested positive. My daughter's just back at work after a 10-day isolation due to a COVID positive. How is the pandemic any better? You've got kids being kept off school. You've got people not able to go to work. Surely that kind of stuff is going to carry on for a bit, isn't it?
Angela, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the one thing we're being told we're not going to hear about from advice today is what's going to happen with schools. Now, there's lots of talk about lifting this bubble restriction, so if one child in the class is kind of falls ill with COVID or is pinged, the whole class has to go home. Now, that was suggestions that was going to be lifted. We're gathering that's not going to be announced today, so you're going to have to wait for that one.
Other countries.
And we know, but it's chaos out there. Talk to any parent of a country, and they'll tell you.
Yeah, other countries are vaccinating children over 12, but of course, still got children at primary school got problems. My daughter was selected to be one of those Ipsos Mori national survey tests. With a swab at the back of the throat. She's 5. We tried. It was not. Oh. It was not a goer at all. So I don't know how on earth you could test and have regular testing of primary school children and make sure they.
Can you not dip it in chocolate or something first? Doesn't that work?
Now Maz says, don't listen to Jason, everybody. If you get a test, don't dip it in chocolate spread. Now Maz says, what about the people who can't have the vaccinations? This is the point of herd immunity, Maz, is that if enough of us have the vaccination, and those of us who can, that protects that small part of the population who can't have the vaccination. But that also includes, as we were just saying, children, every child in the country at the moment. And there's also this thing that, with flu, people who don't get free prescriptions have to pay for their flu vaccination. So we don't have everybody getting flu jabs every year. It's not free. I had to pay for mine last year. I paid 15 quid. So if we're not all getting flu vaccinations, and if, say, boosters on an annual basis for COVID, we have to start paying for those, Jason, this isn't going to be just like flu, is it? Not in the best will in the world. I mean, it'd be lovely if it was, but it's going to take a million years for COVID to evolve.
It's pregnant women as well who aren't allowed to be vaccinated, and this causes all sorts of issues with again about why we're lifting some restrictions if people are still at risk, and again the issue of what do we do with things like holidays? If do you only allow double jab people to go to kind of amber list countries and not have to self-isolate on return? How does that work if you've got young children or a pregnant mother amongst you? So these are all very difficult questions, Maz. And again, I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that one specifically, but I do understand. I sympathise entirely with your sentiment.
Exactly. Now, Sarah says, if masks worked, why do the figures go up when we started wearing them? They don't work. Okay, Sarah, the figures went up because there was a big wave of coronavirus infections in the country, and people started wearing masks too damn late to have an impact on that, because the infections had already happened, and because the government kept saying you don't need to wear masks, masks aren't necessary, and then whoopsie, yes please, could you wear masks? So because they handled it the same way they handled everything, they had higher infections. Asian countries, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, they wear masks every flu season, and you know what, they do it because it works. So perhaps we should. And also, if you're worried that masks don't work at all, ask yourself why. If you're on the operating table, the surgeon wears a mask so he doesn't cough on you. It's a very good reason for that. Now, Eva says to someone called Bernice, why do we have to be double vaccinated to travel if we can still get it and spread it? Because your chances of getting it and spreading it are milder and less likely and so much smaller, isn't it, Jason?
Yeah, they reckon that the Pfizer vaccine offers about 96% protection, and the AstraZeneca about 92 to 94% off the top of my head. So look, there's a 4% chance you can still get the virus, and there was incidents of Andrew Marr last week, who'd been double jabbed and got it. So it's there's no vaccine which is 100% effective for any virus anywhere in the world. But gosh, it makes a lot of difference. So
exactly.
Get jabbed if you can, and get double jabbed.
Yeah, and Maz says, I'm one of the people who can't have the vaccination. Does that mean I'll still be a danger to people? Does that mean I can spread the virus? It means, Maz, unfortunately, and this is one of the things I'm sure the Prime Minister will be asked about this evening, about those who have to shield. And if other people are taking their masks off and other people are being encouraged to go back to work and go on the train and take their masks off, what happens to people like you who can't have the vaccination? Because in theory, you should have to stay home and shield and protect yourself from people who may have the infection. But you can't do that permanently. You can't do that for the rest of your days. And if you're never going to be able to have the vaccination, it's just not a doable thing. And you need to have a degree of herd immunity where enough people have that jab, Maz, that it's really the chances of you getting it are minuscule. And I don't think we're at that stage yet. Now, Karen says, several of my nursing friends have been double jabbed. They've been very unwell when catching the virus again. Masks need to be worn at work. They prevent infection spread. I'm not taking my mask off. Simple. It's a no-brainer. I live out in the sticks, Karen, and I don't need a mask most days. But when I have been around other people, I'm quite happy to wear mine. What about you, Jason? Are you going to be stripping off the muzzle on Freedom Day, or are you happy to continue being strapped?
I think I'm going to carry on wearing a mask because I think it's a politeness thing as much as anything else. It shows that, I do care about the health of other people. And even though I'm double jabbed and the chances of me actually passing on the virus are quite slim, I still think it's a nice practice to do.
Exactly. Now, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, but when I was up in town the other day, I had a bit of a cough, had a bit of a sneeze, and I was really anxious that other people were going to think I had coronavirus, and I was trying to, muffle my sneezes so no one thought badly of me for travelling with a bit of a lurgy. But anyway, I hope I didn't infect all of London when I was up there. Something my daughter brought back from school, I'm afraid, not coronavirus. Now, thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for paying attention. At 5 o'clock this evening, isn't it, the Prime Minister's announcement?
Yes.
We can all tune in and throw things at the television. So that'll be a good time for us all to come back together again. Thank you.
Effective national therapy.
Exactly. Or we could go to Hope Park in Keswick and sit down and cuddle a statue of Max the Miracle Dog, which probably would make a lot more sense than listening to the Prime Minister. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. Bye-bye.